In any large struggle, it cannot be won if people only give out of their surplus. Someone must give out of their substance. Ray Shaddis.
When we moved to Maine, we were young and had young children, and we moved out into the country in a little farm that was very rough. And our idea was to live close to the land.
From where I'm sitting here in the backyard of my farm, Maine Yankee, the site is about 3 kilometers from here. And it is also the prevailing wind comes this way, comes to us. But when it was under construction, we moved to this farm.
From the time that we were young, very young, the time that we were in school, we were always idealistic together and having ideas of doing things in a different way and kind of really partners in what we were doing. So in that respect, it was a natural thing to do, you know.
And we could hear the sound of the construction equipment on site. And they had a speaker system, so we could hear them paging workers, making announcements, came right to us. It let us know how close that plant was to our farm.
We were there for probably a number of years, and it was just to the point where we were getting everything. We had some animals, we had our children were healthy, everything was beautiful. And 3 Mile Island happened in Pennsylvania.
On March 28, 1979, a pump in the secondary cooling loop at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power station failed. Within 2 hours, the water level in the reactor dropped so low that the top of the reactor core was left exposed and began to melt. After 2.5 hours, warning systems first registered increased radiation levels at the station. After 9 hours, hydrogen gas that had accumulated in the containment building exploded. By then, about 1/3 of the fuel core had melted. The amount of radioactivity released into the atmosphere was estimated to be between 2.5 and 13 million curies. Cleanup operations began in 1979 and were officially completed in 1993. They cost nearly $1 billion.
At that moment, it just really was so clear how all of that beautiful family, all that beautiful farm was at risk, because right across the river was the Maine Yankee plant.
With 3 Mile Island, we lost all confidence in the safety of the Maine Yankee plant. And when we investigated, we found a series of incidents that showed us that it was poorly run, poorly managed, poorly maintained.
I remember the day that we made the decision to do something, and it was really, on the one hand, it was hard because we knew it was going to change everything in our lives, but on the other hand,
so my wife and I, we talked over this threat. Our conclusion was that because of releases that had happened at the plant, because of strontium-90, the radioactive isotope showing up in local milk samples, our conclusion was they are poisoning the earth. So we naturally almost decided to take it to a town meeting kind of format.
Cindy Fisher, whom I believe you've spoken with, and myself, got on the phone and started calling everybody we could think of, asking them to call other people, and got together a meeting.
I did not believe it to be a safe or long-term healthy way to create power. And I know that a lot of my initial reaction was instinctual, and it still is.
Construction of the main Yankee nuclear power plant on Bailey Point Peninsula near the town of Wiscasset, Maine was completed in 1972. With its 900-megawatt reactor, the plant was once the largest power producer in the state. Maine's economy is primarily based on commercial fishing, trade, tourism, and forestry. Its beautiful coastline attracts many visitors from the U.S., Canada, and Europe who come to taste the state's famous lobsters. Maine Yankee is located outside Wiscasset, a town with a population of 3,700 that stretches along the Sheepscot River. A so-called emergency planning zone covers the area within a 25-mile radius of the plant and includes 15 towns in 2 states. Edgecombe, hometown of Ray Shaddis, is one of them.
At the time, the population here was 700 people. April of 1979, on a very rainy Thursday night, we had around 1,000 people that came to that meeting.
When I was 15 years old, my mother took me to Boston as a special trip. It was during that awful time when Hiroshima was bombed. And I saw pictures of hurt people, and I swore to myself, never, never nuclear power. Many years later, of course, Betty and I worked in the monitoring network, and we saw around Maine Yankee nuclear power plant a higher rate of leukemia than the rest of the state.
In college, David Hall majored in nuclear physics, so when he was drafted into the Army, he worked in the Radiation Monitoring Corps.
I think it all started with 3 Mile Island, when a lot of us gathered at the town hall in Edgecombe, and that started the movement at getting Maine Yankee shut down. The Citizens Monitoring Network was also formed, and I was I've been a member of the Citizens Monitoring Network, and I also was one of the regional leaders of.
At that time, dosimeters were not available for purchase by the general public in the U.S., and so David came up with a design for such a device. He found people who could build it and asked them for help.
And we were able to produce a measuring instrument for $40, and quite a few of us got these measuring instruments, and so it would alarm if the radiation got above certain levels. And there were instances where they did get above certain levels, and we kept records of what the radiation was doing.
And we worked with a physician who was a geneticist who did a study with us to show that it actually happened.
This irritated certain managers at Maine Yankee.
The Karen Silkwood, you know about Karen Silkwood? She was an activist who had inside information, and she was run off the road. I mean, she was murdered, I think. And she was forced off the road in the dark on her way home. And so we were pretty nervous. We were frightened.
And we were not harassed.
No.
No, we were not. The worst thing that happened to me personally was someone put a snake in my mailbox.
A lawyer friend who was staying here on the farm, we have a little cabin in the woods, and he was staying there, came and he said, "So we protested. So what? We made noise. It was in a newspaper. So what? Now what are you going to do?" And he said, you should have a referendum.
According to Maine's Constitution, citizens have the right to propose new laws which are then voted on in statewide referendums. A committee to shut down Maine Yankee via referendum was organized. Ray Shaddis and his wife Patricia led the campaign.
When we collected the signatures, it took several months, and a vote was scheduled for September 1980. My wife and I worked full-time on that campaign for that vote. We had no savings. We had little money coming in. My wife was working as a waitress in the restaurant, but not much money. We had 6 children to feed and take care of, and we put everything into that. I had come to believe that in any large struggle, it cannot be won if people only give out of their surplus. Someone must give out of their substance.
The farm was still needing to be cared for, and the children, of course. So that was a little challenging, but it was something that I was very much in favor of, you know.
I am, first of all, an artist. This is my work. So in a way, what you do informs how you do things when you become an activist, if you take up a cause. One of our other board members, Friends of the Coast board members, a good friend of mine, Lucy, got the idea because we are artists and we know so many artists to use art to fundraise for Friends of the Coast in our work at Maine Yankee. We found a location on a beautiful coastal estate. We rented a huge white tent for the event. They got the folding chairs, we got the auctioneer, and a few hundred works of art. And the organization netted something in the area of $24,000 to go into our cause in that one event.
The U.S. nuclear industry and Wall Street bankers and investors joined forces with major corporations and raised millions of dollars to torpedo the Maine referendum.
And in the end of that referendum, 42%, 41.9% to be precise, of the voters voted to close the plant. In this area, within the emergency planning zone, the large majority of people voted to close the plant.
Taxes paid by Maine Yankee amounted to 95% of the Wiscasset municipal budget. This money paid for the local school, the fire department, road construction, maintenance, and sewerage.
First up, of course, they did not want the plant shut down ever. I mean, it would be the equivalent of shooting your milk cow. They didn't, no way. So they were very supportive of the plant no matter what. In the town where the plant is, the town got 95%, more than 95% of its taxes from the plant for property tax. Even there, 1/3 of the voters voted to close the plant.
Bill Thompson was one of the leaders of the organization Friends of the Coast. As a manager in a large company, he had good connections with industrial top management.
The incidence of breast cancer in Lincoln County, which we live, is about twice what it is elsewhere in the state. What its cause might be. I was personally involved because my wife was then suffering for breast cancer, and it's a question of whether that was related to our living here as opposed to some other source.
It was then that the Public Monitoring Network began to gather statistics on rates of cancer and other diseases among people living in the vicinity of Maine Yankee. Custom-made dosimeters installed around the plant would send alarm signals when high radiation levels were recorded. Mike McCannum catches lobsters. He lives in a hamlet called Booth Bay and fishes in the Sheepscot River, whose estuary is a perfect habitat for lobsters and various species of fish.
Since 1983, I've been fishing here. And when Maine Yankee became active, we didn't at the time pay much attention. In 1974, the Maine Yankee and the state radiation sampling team, they found radiation in a few lobsters in 1974.
Mike joined Friends of the Coast when he heard about the rupture of pipes in the steam generator at Maine Yankee. This incident troubled a lot of locals.
The personal motivation was my family's health and safety, and my livelihood, my income. If the radiation became bad, my house, as the crow flies, as the bird flies, is 2.5 miles from here.
Christopher Dorothy moved to Maine in 1979. A builder by trade, his concern over environmental damage compelled him to join Friends of the Coast.
Atlantic Ocean is this way. Nuclear power plant Maine Yankee would be approximately probably 12 miles that way, plus or minus. And I got several tours of the place, having friends also who work there. So I got to see firsthand the pool with the cooling rods and the turbine in the building and all the wires underneath, and I don't know, questioned what was going on there.
Annie Burt, a local resident, was also active in Friends of the Coast.
Our group of citizens, which may I say was a small group, we were not large in number, but we made a lot of noise. We did several activities to keep people mindful the plant that was in their midst. We participated in a parade down in Booth Bay Harbor. We had children with wreaths of roses in their hair. We carried our Friends of the Coast banner and threw atomic fireball candies out to the crowd. They expect to get candies.
In April 1995, Maine Yankee was shut down after steam generator pipes ruptured.
And that April, their public relations team decided they would have an Earth Day celebration at the plant. I lost it. I couldn't. To me, that was a great insult to Earth Day. And so we had an Earth Day rally ourselves back at the Edgecombe Town Hall. This time we only had maybe a few hundred people.
A 10% increase in reactor output above permissible levels at Maine Yankee produced additional stress on the narrow diameter pipes in which superheated water from the reactor circulated. The stress load was so high that they ruptured. This incident set off a whole chain of failures and events that alerted the general public to safety problems at the plant. In December 1995, the Union of Concerned Scientists received a letter written by an employee at Maine Yankee, who disclosed numerous deficiencies in its safety system. This anonymous letter opened a Pandora's box over safety at Maine Yankee. Friends of the Coast collected hundreds of signatures on a petition asking Maine's governor to launch a thorough investigation of Maine Yankee. An inspection carried out by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission not only confirmed the allegations made by the anonymous informer, but also uncovered numerous safety violations and defects in the plant's design. In June 1996, Maine Yankee conducted its own detailed analysis of plant operations, which revealed low morale amongst employees and unsafe operating procedures. In November 1996, the plant's main computer was shut down for 41 hours, which led to a total loss of control over certain sections of the plant. In January 1997, the plant reactor was shut down when a leak from the fuel assemblies was detected. The purging of gases from the containment building led to abnormally high releases of radioactivity. On August 6, 1997, the 18 members of Maine Yankee's board of directors voted to terminate operations. Maine Yankee's owners thus announced its closure 11 years before the plant's operating license was due to expire. Dan Thompson was head of Wiscasset's town planning department for 13 years.
This was a significant surprise and stress on the community. Most of us expected the plant to operate for at least another 10 years. Initial reactions were anger.
The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Maine Department of Environmental Protection had no clear plan for decommissioning the plant. There were no regulations in place that govern this procedure. Mike Meissner is a nuclear engineer. Throughout the process of decommissioning Maine Yankee, he was its president and chief nuclear officer.
When Maine Yankee shut down, while there were a few other large-scale commercial nuclear power plants that had also been shut down, no one in the U.S. had done a decommissioning for a full-scale nuclear power plant. So we were the first to really do a decommissioning. The challenges then were the fact that there was no precedent.
When the plant was shut down, the second telephone call that the president of the company made was to me. And the topic of discussion was creating an advisory panel of citizens to be a go-between between the community, the citizens at large, and the company.
During the final 2 years of its operations, the public, the media, and politicians closely monitored everything that happened at Maine Yankee. This resulted in a loss of public trust in nuclear power plants. To make sure the decommissioning of Maine Yankee went smoothly, the process had to be made transparent to the public.
We wanted a good deal of input and from the community, and we pledged to provide the community as much information as we had, both our plans and the technical aspects of decommissioning.
Maine Yankee requested the support of state authorities in establishing a community advisory panel on decommissioning. Don Hudson was the panel's vice chair from the moment it was formed. Dr. Hudson is president of Chewonki Foundation, and the governor appointed him to represent the interests of the environmental protection community on the panel.
I believe that the mere presence of this public body listening to the company, listening to the government, helped to create, not entirely on its own, but helped to create an atmosphere that allowed Ray and his group much better access to information.
When we started our community advisory panel, I really wanted Ray to sit on that panel because we needed some different voices.
The Maine Yankee Atomic Power Company asked if our group, Friends of the Coast, could appoint a representative to that panel, even though we were anti-nuclear.
The Maine Yankee Community Advisory Panel on Decommissioning held its first public session on August 21, 1997, 2 weeks after the decision to shut down the plant was announced.
On the very first meeting, we declared that there could be no process that was valid unless all the information regarding the decommissioning would be on the table, open, made public.
That had previously not been shared. And I believe that as the result of being in this public space, the company was truly obliged to respond positively, and they did.
Mike Selman, who was on the community advisory panel, said, sure. And we began this dialogue with Friends of the Coast where Mr. Shaddis would come to the plant and sit and meet with engineers, and I think the company was really quite open with the documents that he was interested in seeing. So it was a way to establish a a certain level of trust and transparency in the process. And that was just one example.
During the first months of the decommissioning process, Maine Yankee gave panel members access to documents that had previously been restricted to internal use.
Okay. Each drawer, these documents were not just Maine Yankee, but every nuclear plant in the United States.
At present, 3 of the 16 reactors that have been shut down in the U.S. are in standby mode, but the actual decommissioning of these facilities has been postponed.
Given my experience, my view is it's much better to do it right away, right after you shut down, for several reasons. You have your skilled workers there. You want to take advantage of them. They know the facility, they know the plant, they know the area. But for us, it was a clear-cut issue of do it now, keep your best people, return the site to a productive use.
According to preliminary estimates, Maine Yankee needed around $500 million to complete decommissioning.
And as it turned out, if you exclude unexpected items that came up during the decommissioning or new regulations that required cost, came in almost right on that $500 million.
Since the decommissioning of Maine Yankee was begun well before its operating license expired, the company had not saved enough money for it. To raise the necessary funds, a decision was made to increase electricity rates.
We intervened there. We said, they're not entitled to it. The plant is being shut down because of poor management. You cannot reward poor management with money from the electric bills.
The most challenging project that I had during the decommissioning was the segmentation of the reactor internals, packaging and moving the reactor internals for storage.
It took a great deal of planning, not only to do the mechanical work, which we used a high-pressure water jet to cut up the internals, but also and set it up remotely. But there were also strong radiation protection controls during the process. That was the most dose-intensive job we had, because this is mostly demolition, and we took safety very seriously, and we implemented a very strong safety program throughout the site for our workers. When you're tearing down walls, when you're setting off explosives to demolish buildings and the like, it's a very dangerous atmosphere, so you need quite good controls.
A good example of that is when we took down the turbine building. The engineers came to me early on and said, we'd like to use explosives to take the turbine building down. This was shortly after the attack of 9/11, a couple of weeks after, and there was heightened concern, obviously, in the community about explosives and just anything out of the ordinary, especially at a nuclear power plant. And my initial reaction to the engineers was, this is going to be difficult. People, it's going to be hard for people to understand this.
Removing the radioactive risk. This particular plant, on buildings which were cleared of radioactive contamination, they used explosives to take them down. There were enormous clouds of dust, so the question would be raised, is there a radioactive component to the dust?
The Community Advisory Panel invited professional radiologists and environmental experts to ensure that it had an unbiased view of these issues.
So on the second meeting, we came in and the federal standard of for residual radiation, how much is to be left in the ground, was 250 microsieverts. But we had found government documents where agencies of the federal government were arguing that this was not safe, not protective of public health. That was the phrase. And so we pushed first for 15 millirem, which was what was recommended by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and they would not move on it.
Ray was very active in pushing a lower standard for Maine Yankee. Radiation
Standards are changing. They always have changed from the very beginning when they thought that a safe dose of radiation was one that didn't make your skin too red, which is deadly. But people didn't know. And over the years, until very recently, the amount of permissible radiation in the occupational standards and in the standards for the general public have gone down, 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 down.
To persuade the public that the existing standard of 250 microsieverts was sufficiently safe, Maine Yankee financed and organized meetings with federal experts.
We debated them, and then when they wouldn't move, we said, because we investigated what other states were doing, the state of Massachusetts, the state of New York, and they were moving to adopt not a 15, or excuse me, that would be not a 150, but a 100 microsievert standard. And so we came back and we said, okay, you will not move to 150? We are now demanding 100. And we began a political campaign, a public relations campaign, to push them to that.
Before he was appointed Maine's nuclear safety inspector, Patrick Dusty had worked for several years at Maine Yankee, so he knew the situation well.
I knew where most of the thing was, so I personally felt they could easily meet the 10 millirem standard by setting an administrative limit. And so I personally felt that they could easily meet it.
His question, or his proposal, prompted us to take a serious look. And when we took a serious look, we realized we could do it.
The stipulated norm of 100 microsieverts of residual radiation meant that plant premises and buildings, as well as all materials on the site, had to be inspected for possible radioactive contamination.
What was the additional cost, not only in money, but in time? Turned out